Hello, and welcome to Grey.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Shedrick Davis, Western Regional Director at Lambda Legal, an organization committed to achieving full recognition of the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, and everyone living with HIV through impact litigation, education, and public policy work. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is ally, advocate, friend, neighbor, defender, and lawyers of LGBT people. Hello, Shedrick. Welcome to Grey.com Talks. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Kareem. I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Wonderful. How would you describe your organization to someone who is not familiar with your work?
So we are an organization of lawyers and other professionals dedicated toward advancing and defending LGBTQ people and those with HIV here in the United States. We have been doing this work since 1971, where we originally founded in New York City. And have spread throughout the country. Currently, I'm here in Los Angeles, representing our Western region. Basically what we do is through advocacy in court, what we call impact litigation. So we find an issue, actually, that is important to the communities we represent. And then we look for ways to advance through law the progress of the community by our advocacy in court. So while we do this through individual people and their very real stories and concerns, we look for specific instances to move the conversation along so that we can advance for everybody in the community. So we will take a larger issue, find cases that we think here in the country represent the best chance to develop an idea on how to improve a situation or to defend a situation where our communities are under attack. And we will go to court and try and advance that idea. We also do policy work in that we want to be thought partners with policy officials and public officials, government officials, and other policy partners in thinking through the ramifications of the policies and laws that they're developing that affect the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities, as well as people with HIV, so that there's a legal lens on the work that they're doing, so that they think through, if you do something, we want to make sure it first does no harm in another area to a community that's important to us. And we also want to make sure that it will hold up in court. So oftentimes we work in areas that are considered controversial for some. And you may have heard of the culture wars here in the United States. So a lot of what we do gets challenged quite frequently in court. So we want to make sure that the ideas that we're advancing, as well as the laws that we're trying to change, are on solid legal footing, so they don't get challenged in court, or if they are challenged, they're upheld. So that's our primary purpose. We also, in addition to our advocacy work in court, as well as our policy work, we do education of our community on their legal rights. We run a help desk, which answers 5,000 or more calls every year from around the country of people who feel like they've been discriminated against and want some guidance and to talk to someone. And we do that through media also by explaining what's going on in the law so people know their rights. Just because you have rights, if you don't know them, you can't exercise them. So that's basically what we do, Karim, in a nutshell.
What I really like about your organization that you mentioned that you're not only raising awareness about the legal issues that LGBT people face, but you are also taking action in developing cases, in defending those cases in courts, so the better laws for LGBT people are created. So the laws cover the civil rights of LGBT people. So it's not only awareness, but it's also action. That is something that is very unique and something that needs to be done to create a society which is equal and which is just. So I applaud you for taking action.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are some of the key issues, legal issues that people of LGBT community as well as people living with HIV face today in United States of America?
So in the United States of America, we've certainly had a lot of progress over the time that Lambda Legal has been in existence, the last almost 50 years. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary. And we have been at the center of developing the theories and advancing the arguments that have brought about a lot of that change. So, for example, in the area of marriage, we started decades ago developing the theory and advancing the case that lesbians and gay people should be able to marry on equal terms with cisgender straight couples. And we did this in a case in Hawaii. Now, following the trajectory of that, there were a lot of losses and a lot of disappointment that came while we were advancing that. But gradually, step by step, we built the argument that, lesbian and gay people should be able to marry. And that was successfully brought before the Supreme Court in a case called Obergefell, where we were a part of that case after many, again, decades of advancing the cause of marriage equality. That being said, you ask what's going on today. Well, with all our victories, we find that you can never rest on your laurels. You never have 100% success. Even once you have a victory, there is about continuing to interpret it, continuing to try and get enforcement of that victory, and unfortunately continuing to fight rearguard actions from those who would come and try and take away that victory. So you can never stop. So in the area of marriage equality, for example, we currently work on making sure that Social Security benefits, this is our elder care system in the United States, and surviving spouse benefits go toward lesbian and gay folks equally to the way that they would go to straight people were they similarly situated. And that's a fight that continues today, as well as making sure that the rights that were won are enforced, that people are not able to get out of recognizing our marriages on an equal basis to others. And there are challenges where people are trying to provide basically a second-class status type marriage where we have it in name, but we don't have it in reality, where people are able to opt out of, decide that they don't want to recognize the marriages, whether it's in a business situation, such as I do not want to serve you or employ you or even bake a cake for you because I don't believe, or I'm told, or my religion doesn't believe that I should have to obey this particular non-discrimination law. So we spend a lot of time right now trying to enforce that. We certainly respect the right of everyone to their religion and their religious beliefs. However, when you're out in the greater society, the United States operates on the principle that everyone needs to be treated equally, and while respecting religious beliefs, but also that you don't get to treat different people differently because you don't like them for one reason or the other. And we find ourselves doing that right now quite a bit. And it is a new frontier of argument that we're involved in. Similarly, our organization has gone through many decades of fending off attacks on our communities based on misguided stereotypes or outright lies and untruths about our community and the perceived dangers that we might bring to a population, so that we have been perceived as predators and threatening in so many contexts for many years. For millennia, actually, where it is always the gay man or the lesbian that will come and harm children, take away the ability of society to operate, will undermine the decency or security. And these arguments have always come at us. It's often when we had an argument a few years ago about gays in the military, whether lesbians and gay people should serve in the military. The argument was, well, others will not feel comfortable. They will not feel safe. We will, if we are allowed in the military, we will attack other military personnel in the shower for our own sexual gratification. And the military will collapse. Well, gays and lesbians have operated successfully in the military since that rule was lifted for years. And our military is still very much in place, and none of that has happened. But despite the fact that those sort of lies and misrepresentations were presented, we still see them coming up in various forms. We saw it a few years ago when all of a sudden there were started to become vicious attacks on our transgender brothers and sisters by using the same thought process that we are going to be a threat to regular society if we are allowed our transgender siblings to participate in regular society. And that has carried forward today with some of the same lies and mischaracterizations, which say that transgender people are a threat to regular society, either because they're predatory and should not be allowed to use the bathrooms, for example, of their gender identity, similar to the way that gay people were going to be predatory, much as I used the soldiers and sailors example a few seconds ago, that they're also going to take away opportunities from others if they're allowed to participate fully in society. There is no evidence for any of the charges that are currently being brought up. Again, these charges have gone on for millennia in some form or fashion. There's no evidence that any of this is actually true, but people use it to divide the communities and to actually enact laws which restrict the ability of our transgender brothers and sisters to operate in our society. So we as Lambda Legal are taking that on head on and saying that, no, you can't divide us in that way, using the same lies and mistruths that that have been used for millennia against our communities. and that everyone deserves an equal place at the table and an ability to live their full and best lives within the law, and that we are not going to have second-class citizens within this country. So those are two, the religious areas, the exemptions that people are asking for. Our attacks on the transgender community right now are areas where we deal with currently. But just because those are the issues that are in the headlines right now, we continue to deal with the same issues that we have dealt with since the beginning. Employment discrimination against our community. Even though we had a wonderful ruling on employment from our Supreme Court last year, which now has employment protections for LGBTQ people throughout the country, where before it was only limited to certain states, it's now a matter of enforcing that and making it real in the lives of people so that they do not have to worry about losing their income and support just because they're gay, or having to move from one area of the country where they don't feel safe in their employment to another place of the country where they feel more secure. That's important for us. Similarly, kids are still being bullied. On playgrounds, we still need to hold schools and administrators responsible for taking care of our children during their developmental years. Similarly, seniors need to be secure and not be forced back into the closet when they become dependent on others for their care as they age. And so we're taking on those issues. We're taking on issues of reparative therapy, where we were one of the first to really help develop a theory that the so-called therapy to change people from gay to straight was actually not successful, and in fact was in many cases torture. The way that it was applied against people, which left lasting damage, led to suicides, and led to other horrible outcomes. So we've been gradually working with the professional medical field to enact laws which restrict the ability of this so-called pseudoscience therapy to be employed on minors, people under the age of 18. I'm sure you figured out by now, Karim, I could go on. We've got a big docket. We cover a lot of areas, but it all really boils down to, again, trying to protect and defend and advance the rights of LGBTQ and people with HIV in the society.
Although United States has progressed in terms of advancing the rights of LGBT people, there's still so many key issues that remain unresolved. And although legislation of the same-sex marriage being accepted, it doesn't mean it is fully being implemented. So that's why there needs to be constant action, constant work on being done, and your organization is doing that. And the stigma that was faced by lesbians and gay men for so many years is now being directed to transgender people. And that's what we've seen with members of lesbian and gay community 10 years, 20 years. Now we're seeing again with transgender people. And there's so many aspects of life that's the aspects of life of LGBT people that is being affected by such unjust misconceptions, such unjust practices of people who disagree, of people of certain faith that do not accept the rights, the civil rights of LGBT people. We talked mainly about the key challenges, key issues that people, lesbians and gays, as well as transgender people face. But Could you please elaborate on some of the issues that people living with HIV face today? We know that HIV and AIDS were an epidemic, pandemic 30 years ago, but medicine has revolutionized it, and there's much better care, and people with HIV now can live long lives. However, there's still, I believe, stigma, but can you please elaborate on that?
I'm so glad you asked about this, Karim, because Lambda Legal has stayed in the fight and been committed to the defense of people living with HIV since the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic. We, in fact, brought the first case in the United States arguing against discrimination against people who have HIV. In that case, it was against for providing dental care. We still deal with HIV discrimination issues. People, despite the science and the years that have gone by, we continue to have discrimination claims that are brought against people based upon past history of HIV, not recognizing the advances that have taken place in science, and also just on bigotry, on the types of people who get HIV and othering them and treating them as less than. So we still have those discrimination cases that we bring. Currently, we work to make sure that we are currently very involved in making sure that the laws that were enacted, sometimes obviously misguided, but in the past, to try and criminalize people who have HIV and hold them criminally accountable for even consensual contact with others are repealed, withdrawn, and taken off the books, and that they are not used to enforce and further stigmatize and otherize people who have HIV. So we are working to repeal some of those draconian laws from the 80s and 90s that were put into place to do that in this country. And we are happy that there's been a great deal of success recognizing the science that has happened there. I do want to say that everything that your premise has is correct. The science has made miraculous leaps, and we are very fortunate in this country to have that as a whole. But the intersection and the intersectionality of issues around HIV and its transmission, there's still an epidemic in many communities. People continue to convert to positive on HIV through lack of knowledge, because there are places where sex education is not taught, and especially to people from the LGBTQ community on how to protect themselves. There is a lack of access or knowledge on getting to some of these medical treatments once people have contracted HIV. So obviously we have preventive measures and we have others. Now, unfortunately, the intersectionality often falls on the most marginalized in our society, which is traditionally women and people of color, and particularly our transgender brothers and sisters who don't have the same access to either the knowledge, information, or the medication to either help them prevent getting HIV in the first place or treatment afterwards. And they're often in places where the stigma of being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender adds to a sense of shame and an unwillingness to admit or seek out knowledge or information for fear that will further marginalize them in the communities where they came from, either because of the cultural preferences of those communities or the religious beliefs that they may spring from that are very conservative and will penalize someone getting that sort of treatment or knowledge. We're still fighting against that in this country, and it is particularly acute in communities of color here, where, especially for young people, all these years later, have some very high rates of conversion to HIV positivity. And at this day and time, there's really no excuse for a society to have that. So our work is not done there.
Although the science has progressed and now we can protect ourselves and everyone can protect themselves from HIV, take precautions and educate themselves, still the issue of awareness on the advancement and the issue of lack of medical support for newly concepted people remain unresolved. And one step of that you mentioned is through sex education, is mentioned through educating ourselves. And hopefully people will be more curious about what advancements have been made and educating themselves and stigmatize not at all or even less or not at all the people living with HIV. How do you see, we talked about the key issues, we talked about the progress that your organization has been doing in addressing severe challenges that LGBT people face. But how do you see the landscape of civil rights of LGBT people changing in the next 10 to 15 years in the United States?
I think the one thing that has become clear, I don't have a crystal ball to know where everything is going. The famous quote, often attributed, but not his, attributed to Martin Luther King, is, the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice. I believe that. And some say it's, you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I continue to believe we will be in that situation for many decades to come, if nothing else, because we now have a much more conservative court environment. The judges that were appointed, particularly through the last administration, are very conservative and have, in many instances, have indicated they are not friends of our communities and actually outright hostile to our communities. So how the law will continue to be interpreted is anyone's guess and question. The benefits, I think, for the communities that we serve is that public acceptance and perception of LGBTQ people in the United States has only continued to grow and rise over the years, and it has taken remarkable leaps and bounds. And that is going to drive the conversation. It has, quite frankly, cornered many of our adversaries to the boxes where they now find those arguments we talked about earlier of having to ask for religious exemptions to discrimination laws, where before they were just able to freely flout and treat LGBTQ people badly. Now they've had to put fig leaves and make excuses for that, or because they cannot get laws that outright ban us or criminalize us in the country passed on any sort of broad basis. So their options are going to continue to shrink. Just as people got to know lesbians and gay men previously, they are going to get to know now trans people now that they are part of the conversation. The fear factor is going to go away. The understanding factor is going to go away. The ability to recognize gender identity and gender expression is going to grow within our society. It is going to take time, and there will be fights, as we're seeing right now, along the way. But as people get to know one another and know more about our community, and know that they have people, oftentimes, probably within their own families, that fit into the categories of LGBTQ, things get better. People develop empathy. And I think that's going to be the saving grace against all the attacks that we're going to continue to experience over the decades to come. I don't know how and cannot predict where the law will be or go, or what new crisis or opportunities for expanding the circle of equality will come up. They most certainly will. We couldn't have predicted 20 years ago where we are now, 20 years today. I have no doubt that we'll be able to predict what's going to come up in the next 20 years. I think we just need to be ready to show empathy and an open heart and continue to tell our stories and continue to advocate for justice and an expansion of equality.
Absolutely. The public perception and public acceptance hopefully will continue grow as it has been growing in the past years, and which hopefully will lead to more just and more equal laws for LGBT people. If someone would like to support Lambda Legal, how can they do that?
So we have a wonderful, informative website that I would direct people to, and it is www.lambdalegal, it's spelled LAMBDALEGAL, it's all the two words, Lambda Legal, one word, .org, O-R-G. And you can go there and you can get information about any of the topics I've talked about. You can also go there and ask for help. We have a help desk staffed by attorneys who are standing by and willing to answer questions. And like I said, we do over 5,000 a year. People who feel like they've experienced discrimination. And we will try and connect them to resources that might help them deal with that. And there's also, we are a nonprofit. So thank you for the belief and the mission that your media organization is showing in trying to shine the light on nonprofits. But the only way we operate is through donations from the public, which support our work. And there is a space there where you can donate a little or a lot. And we are grateful for all of that, all of the public support we receive. And we would love to welcome people into the Lambda family. If you just want to go and sign up to get more information from us, you can also do that on the website so that you will become part of the fast-breaking news that happens in our field of work, if this is the work that interests you. So please don't hesitate to check out the website. There's a lot of information and there are opportunities to become involved. So thank you for that opportunity to promote that for me.
Wonderful. The link to lambdalegal.org will be provided in the link in the description, so you can familiarize yourself with the great work that Lambda Legal is doing, as well as if you would like to support their organization, you can donate on their website. Thank you so much, Cedric. It was wonderful to get to know you and the great work your organization is doing.
Thank you so much, Karim. Have a wonderful day. This has been a pleasure to participate on the program.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important. The civil rights of LGBT people need to be protected. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.